All right. The public meeting of the City of Tallahassee Independent Ethics Board is now called to order at 4 p.m. on Tuesday, May 21, 2024. Board members are present here at City Hall along with members of the public. The Assistant Communications Department, the Information Technology Department, this meeting is live streamed on the Ethics Board's website, and we are recording it for future reference. There's a delay with online communications, and we should all be patient. As always, we thank those members of the City of Tallahassee for their support. For those attending the meeting online, please make sure your microphones are muted. We ask the public to email ethics@talgov.com if they wish to speak online on agenda or non-agenda items. Those who have submitted their names will be allowed to speak as scheduled. While the meeting is in progress, please do not speak during the board's discussion. We have set aside 2 places on the agenda for the public to speak. For those who wish to make a public comment, please complete a speaker request form and forward it to the administrative assistant, Ms. Tasker Leverson Green. Be sure to state what you wish to speak about the form. Public speakers will be given up to 3 minutes in accordance with the board's bylaws. We could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Tasker, could you please do the roll call?
Kirsten Costa, Patrick Kelly,
Here.
Carlos Ray,
Here.
Rita Calhoun, Adam Commissar,
Here.
Brian Smith. Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
First thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the April 16th, 2024 meeting. Does anyone have any comments? Has everyone had a chance to read those minutes? No comments, if I could get a motion. So moved. Moved by Carlos Ray, seconded by Ms. Calhoun. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Passed. Public comments on agenda items?
Yes, we have 2, Mr. Peter Bootsing and Ernie Payne on agenda item number 10.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Peter Butzine. I live at 2358 Carefree Cove in Tallahassee. I'm here on behalf of the Citizens for Ethics Reform. While I await advice from the other members of our organization, particularly our attorney members, in my opinion, the proposed advisory opinion that will be before you as agenda item 10 just doesn't pass my smell test. The advisory opinion concludes with reservations that a covered city employee may own or be a member of an LLC which profits from its advice to clients who seek to procure contracts with the city. Indeed, the opinion is based on several assumptions. The first assumes that the covered individual does not use his or her position with the city to help determine outcomes for the LLC's clients. Well, if the assumption is false, the opinion would clearly draw the opposite conclusion. In addition, the advisory opinion assumes that the covered individual will have no work-related relationship with the awarding or distribution of city funds. The question of whether the inquirer has a role in the distribution of funds is crucial to this inquiry. Until decided, this board should vote against the proposed opinion. The simple fact that the covered individual is an employee of the city suggests that he or she could use personal contacts with fellow city employees to influence the outcome of awarding city contracts. Indeed, the likely purpose of the LLC is to gain contingent profit from clients who benefit from the city employees' professional relationships and insider information. The opinion recognizes that the inquirer is prevented from using non-public information that would present an unfair advantage to the LLC or its clients. Yet the LLC's purpose and profit motive appear to cash in on the inquirer's knowledge of the procurement contract process. The opinion also concludes that the action presented would most certainly violate Florida's ethics ordinance. Well, if you decide to approve the advisory opinion, then there's obviously a serious gap in the local ethics ordinance, and it's a gap that would have to be plugged. Although the city's personnel policy is beyond your jurisdiction, the city should prohibit behavior that so blatantly violates misuse of public position and prohibitions against conflict of interest, not to mention the issue of the city employees double dipping. I am perplexed by the proposed advisory opinion. While it makes a strong case for impropriety, it appears to conclude that, based on highly improbable assumptions, the ethics and lobby ordinances do not restrict the inquirer's involvement in the proposed business. The inquirer also makes me wonder whether that inquirer has taken Dwight's ethics class. In the very least, I ask that you postpone the action on the advisory opinion until we, particularly our attorneys, have had the opportunity to review the opinion more carefully. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Yes. Ernie Payne, agenda item number 10.
Thank you. You may know me as Ernie Payne. I don't have anything prepared to say. I read this through hurriedly, and I apologize that I don't have all the background information that I'm sure you all have. But there's some things bothered me about the advisory opinion. Everything that Peter said, sure, but the judgment that it is okay with the Tallahassee Ethics Code, but it could violate the state ethics code. And the Independent Ethics Board was set up in part to provide a stronger ethics code than what the state provided. So that in itself seems to be difficult for me. I wanted to point out the statement of the ethics board. It says it's to promote the actual and perceived integrity of our city government. If you're going to provide an advisory opinion that says the alleged violation or proposed action could be a violation of the city's ethics code, but could be all right with the state ethics code, I think an advisory opinion should not just state the facts behind the ethics code as if you were a defense attorney, but it should advise the requester not to do it because it could violate the perceived integrity of the city. Like I said, didn't prepare anything, but that's the gist of it. I hope that I didn't receive some information that you all have that would make more sense to me. But to me, advising a requester that what they're proposing is all right because it's by the letter admissible by the Tallahassee Ethics Code is not a good advisory opinion. It's all right to state facts about what the ethics code says, but the role of the ethics board should be to advise the employees of Tallahassee as to what to do. Thank you.
Any more? All right. Next, we will have the ethics officer report.
Thank you, Chair. As stated, this is a snapshot, doesn't include everything. You've seen some of our activity. Every month we conduct virtual training for new employees, usually 2 a month. We had one classroom instruction for new firefighters, and we usually do that one in person at their request. We met with the city attorney to discuss the ethics code and proposed revisions, as well as to discuss new legislation and how that might impact the city and the ethics board. We conferred with the other local ethics commissions and state and the ethics State Ethics Commission concerning recent legislation and written procedures for handling complaints against the Ethics Board and staff. We have continued developing the annual ethics training for city employees and updating the ethics guide, which you'll see next month. And we made preparations for this meeting and maintained the Facebook page and responded to ethics complaints. As far as the budget goes, we still have a very strong budget. We do limited spending, as you see. Probably the largest expenditure is legal fees, which includes asking the board attorney to attend commission meetings, which was very relevant. We have a budget, or as of May 1st, we had a budget of $207,742 out of $403,004. And, I made note of things like unclassified fees of $40,000 was allocated, and we haven't spent a cent on that, and we usually do. And unclassified contractual services, we haven't spent a cent. In part, some things that we've contracted for in the past, such as voiceovers, where we have the equipment to do all of that ourselves. So all that is making a difference. So we're in a good place with the budget. Any questions thus far? Any questions about our activity or the budget? Not,
Before you read all 11, I was just going to ask, did everyone have a chance to go through them, just so he doesn't have to go through all 11 of them since there's so many? Because if so, you can just recommend closing them,
okay.
so you didn't have to read all of them.
Is there any one of these that you have a question about? No. Okay. Then before I make this motion, someone in the other office suggested, I won't say what that is, but somebody else suggested that we change it to try to make it clearer to people that we're the Tallahassee Independent Ethics Board. Because they seem to think that we're the State Ethics Commission, and that's why we're getting a lot of this. Did I represent you correctly? So I do listen to you. We recommend closing all of these.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we recommend closing these 11 issues or inquiries. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on.
Okay. General update, the only thing I have is that we are, well, I'll report this, and I can't go into detail because the details haven't been, the overall report hasn't been made yet, but if you recall, there was a request to do an audit of our expenditures along with city audit. I can tell you that the Inspector General basically said that this was the best audit that the city has experienced. It was a clean audit, so he's very proud of that. Next month, I'll report more on the details. And I'll also tell you that since Tasker has been here, nothing's been reported on the negative side. So we're headed in a very positive direction.
Good job.
And that's all I have on that. Next is the legislative update, which is John.
We still talking about 7014, I think.
Well, 714 is still.
601.
So we're talking
Yes.
601.
Yeah, 7014, oh, this is the police. Okay. 7014 is still sitting in the Senate. It's been 2.5 months and it has not been sent to the governor. So let's continue to wait. House Bill 601 is the bill, I think we may have discussed that regarding police officers. It amends the police officers' Bill of Rights to primarily, the primary purpose is to eliminate citizen independent review boards. But the language does go a little broader. Now, the Police Officer Bill of Rights is found in 112.532 and 533. 532 kind of goes through basic what this is, rights, law enforcement officers, correctional officers while under investigation. It provides safeguards that you have to provide to them. You have to meet with them at their local precinct, or the officer's location has to be during normal hours, preferably when they're on shift, et cetera. The language that appears to be most significant, and there's some cases that I've is, let me just read the whole line. Whenever a law enforcement officer or a correctional officer is under investigation and subject to interrogation by members of his or her agency for any reason that could lead to disciplinary action, suspension, demotion, or dismissal, the interrogation must be conducted under the following conditions. And then it lists A through J. The key words there are by members of his or her agency and lead to disciplinary action. So there are a number of cases, Timoney versus City of Miami. This primarily, the Bill of Rights does not apply to chiefs of police. So John Timoney was the police chief back in 2008. He sought an opinion. They danced around the issue of whether the Bill of Rights provided an exclusive means to investigate police. They essentially said, well, you're not covered by it anyway, so we won't go down that road. But they did provide some dicta on that and didn't really get into the meat of it. There is another case out of Central Florida with Sheriff Deming. And in this case, they did go against a citizens review board. And they do talk about the Timoney case, and they kind of go to the dicta, and they talk about how they spent a lot of time emphasizing the fact that this citizens review board was independent from the city. And they said that because they had that independence, they wouldn't necessarily be covered by the Bill of Rights. But then again, dicta, they didn't really go into it. Demings went the opposite direction. They said, no, the Bill of Rights is exclusive, exhausts everything, you can't do anything else. There's another case, D'Agostino, the City of Miami. They talk about issues of misconduct, and this again is the Civilian Investigative Panel, which is the oversight board. Those are wiped out anyway. These cases are somewhat relevant because it talks about the independence and whether they are, whether they're able to discipline. And really where a lot of this, the direction this goes into is that a lot of these boards were fine because they didn't have any power to discipline the police officers. They could only make recommendations to the chief of police or the city manager. So in those cases, they said, okay, well, that would be acceptable. We are different because we are able to discipline. We have a section 2-16, I believe it is, that establishes all the penalties that we're able to impose. So I do think that there is a problem. We are able to discipline. Whether we're independent, I know that, you know, it depends which day of the week we're talking. Some days we're part of the city, some days we're not. But we do have independent in our names. I think we can make an argument that we're independent, but the fact that we're able to discipline could lead us to the opinion that we don't have any jurisdiction over these police officers. Now going to House Bill 601, that bill amends 112.533, and it goes a little further. It says a political subdivision may not adopt or attempt to enforce any ordinance relating to either of the following. And then B, I think we talked about this, is the civilian oversight. But the first one is the receipt, processing, or investigation by any political subdivision of this state of complaints of misconduct by law enforcement or correctional officers, except as expressly provided in this section. So the question is, does that change whether we are excluded under the Bill of Rights? I don't think this changes anything. I think where this could be problematic is for an inspector general, where they're not disciplining, they're just doing investigations and issuing findings, which was another case where they said inspector generals could investigate police without violating the Bill of Rights because they weren't disciplining, they were just issuing findings. This doesn't have the disciplinary language, but it does. It says provided in this section. And the language about the disciplinary actions in a different section, but it's still within the Bill of Rights. So that's probably not our fight. It's more of an Inspector General issue. And I think we'll just have to see how that goes. I think a lot of people around the state are going to have to wrap their heads around it. I know down in Miami-Dade, our counterparts down there have been watching this, trying to figure out what this means and if it changes the Bill of Rights at all. But I think right now, I think that it's probably safe to say that we didn't have that jurisdiction to begin with, and this legislation doesn't change that. So, and essentially the exclusive remedy is that just every complaint must go through internal affairs. If we were to receive something, I think that's just something we would refer over like we do with other complaints. So, and that's really about it on 601. Since I've been here, which has been quite some time, we've never received a complaint about a police officer. I don't know if we ever will. So I think if that day ever comes, we could revisit this and see how this issue has developed around the state. But as of now, I think we could probably afford to just sit back and wait and see. But I do think that if we were to make a judgment call today, I would say more than likely we do not have jurisdiction over police officers.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
We do not have jurisdiction over police officers.
We would refer to the Police Department Internal Affairs
Yes, yes. So
based on this new legislation.
I think based on the old as well.
Okay.
So, and I think it's kind of like what we just heard about the advisory opinion. Just because we can't do it doesn't mean the person could do it. We just send it to the appropriate person and they address the issue. Sometimes there's something that's just not in our wheelhouse, and it's our job to delegate that out to the appropriate agency or board or body. So,
Yeah, and we really would have two options. One would be to send it to Internal Affairs, and the other one is to do, I just worked it out, I forgot what you call it now, but we could do a complaint directly to the Criminal Justice and Training Commission if we thought it was serious enough. So there is an avenue, a legal avenue for that.
yeah, and that is Nick. The board that he was on. What's it called again?
Criminal Justice Standards
Yeah,
and Training.
that,
Commission.
that's in the statute as an exception. So that's all I have, really.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. And then,
Another quick question of mine. So what essentially happens to the Tallahassee Police Review Board?
Oh, it's going to be abolished. Yeah. All of them in the state.
Even if they were an advantage. Now,
and next is the charter review update.
yeah, and John, you can build anything that I missed, but I believe we had one, or I can't remember whether one or two meetings since we met here, but between the two meetings, the city commission did approve by a vote of 4-1, or did agree to make this part of the referendum, if you will, in November. So they're going through that process where jurisdiction is going to be limited to city officials who act in with the outside governmental agencies on behalf of the city commission. When they're doing that, they're still under our jurisdiction, putting that before voters. And the other is, and they have a choice, and we stated it to them this way. They could give us authority in a limited capacity to have whistleblower protection or act on whistleblower protection for whistleblower complaints when they involve the city commission, or they could make the inspector general more independent where he could have that authority. And they chose to make him more independent. For example, instead of a 3-2 vote to dismiss him, and now it will require a 4-1 vote. And that's what the idea, that would make him more secure. And in his words, he would feel less fearful about doing his job. And then there were some other stipulations, but the whole concept was geared around making him more independent. One of the discussions was about who would advise him as far as the legal attorney is concerned, whether that would be a city attorney or an outside attorney. And I think the discussion there was that there was already something in place that allowed first of all, the city attorney is responsible for appointing or a person to handle these cases. But the city attorney can, if there's a conflict of interest, designate an outside source to assist the inspector general. So that was part of the concern. And I do want to say that, we took us 2 years to get here. And it really came down to a conversation with City Commissioner Diane Williams-Cox. When I spoke to her, I explained to her it's been 2 years. I explained to her that more than anything, we just wanted an answer, and we've been trying to get an answer. So at the point where the part of the city commission was saying that they weren't going to take any action, she spoke up and said, we need to give them a response. We need to give them an answer. At that point, the mayor sent us away and asked us to come back with an analysis. And there still was a lot of resistance from him in particular. But the Commissioner Cox was consistent, and I think consistent with her view of the Inspector General's office position when it was first designated, because she helped initiate that. So in her mind, from what I interpreted, this was a follow through, because at the time he was established, there was no charter review. So this offered the opportunity to elevate his position and give him greater independence. So that's where it's moved to. That both will be put before the voters in November. There's been some discussion that because they also are putting something before the voters where they could increase their salaries from the minimum of something like 45,000 to wherever the Leon County commissioners make. Some believe that people will vote against that adamantly, and because of that, it may bring down the other issues. And frankly, in talking to people, I don't get that opinion. I think people in Tallahassee are smarter than that. So I think it's more or less, I don't know how it gets done, but I think it's a matter of giving clarity to each issue and trusting the voters to vote. But did I leave anything out?
I think you talked about the independence, the way that was done, supermajority vote.
Mm-hmm.
So they would need 4 votes to terminate Inspector General, as opposed to now it's just 3 of the 5. As far as how that's different than what we were asking for, I think this is probably broader and provides more protection to employees than what we were offering. For us, it would be kind of a 2-prong approach. One, they have to make sure that the disclosed information that they were giving to us in the form of a complaint fell within the enumerated disclosures within the statute. And then that would also have to be a violation of our ethics code for us to be able to take it in. Here, they don't have that second step. They just, as long as the disclosure falls under the statute, they're able to accept it as a whistleblower complaint.
So it's still we're concerned about, and well, at least we feel that it does it in a satisfactory way. Because it's broader than it would have been if we had authority. We did go forth supporting it and hoping that we were representing you as you would have wished.
I have 2 questions. How is the Inspector General more independent? Is he still hired by the City Commission? So simply the fact that instead of a 3-2 vote, it takes a 4-1 vote to dismiss him, that makes him more independent.
That's what they say, yes. So I know that we looked at other jurisdictions. I think Jacksonville, Miami-Dade create these, it's almost like how we're created. All these different agencies create a board, and that board interviews people and hires them. And so in that case, they're very independent because the commissioners can't touch them. Here, it's more independent than it is now. So there is somewhat of a buffer, and that's, I think, in hopes that we'll be able to do the investigation without any fear of retribution. So,
And that's not unique. There are other cities who
You call the Inspector General more independent because it takes a 4-to-1 vote.
and there's a little more to it, because he's following procedures for Inspector General and through a standardized process. So he's modeling after something that exists, not just feel good.
the organization that certifies has minimal standards, and this meets those standards.
Right.
My second question is, who develops the language for the referendum? Is there any review of it? Can it be questioned before it actually is put to the voters? Because as you know, that wording is critical.
Yeah, that was voted on. It went before the commission and the public could speak. And then that's voted on by the city commission. But it's done in public view.
And that's finalized already? It is finalized?
Not yet.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Not yet.
Would it be asking too much for us to get a copy of it when it's finalized for informational purposes?
Sure.
Right.
It's publicly available now. It was presented at the May 8th meeting, so it's available with the May 8th materials, but it has to be voted finally at the June 19th meeting.
And you wrote that.
I assisted.
And as you know, I'm not inferring anything. I'm just, as you know, anytime you vote on anything, the way it's worded is so important.
Right.
And I just want to make sure it's very clear to the voters when they read it, what it's saying.
Right. And that was part of the discussion at the last meeting when they voted on it. There were concerns. It's just like, there was a lot of discussion about the pay increase that they're trying to get. And, there's one argument, well, you didn't put in there that it doubles the salary. And then the other argument that we're matching what they're making. So it is perception, and it depends on how you want to argue the case. I mean,
My concern was whether or not it would be written in the affirmative or the negative for that exact reason, as people are going through reading.
Is this a situation where it's appropriate for us to authorize you or the chair, somebody to, as we get closer to the election, to do one of those letters to the paper that you've done before? Basically, if we support it, telling the public or the voters that we support it. I know there's been times where we've gotten to that point where we were trying to push one of the issues. I didn't know if it's appropriate for us to take positions on things like that.
probably not on other issues, or I'd love to. But on this issue, on the jurisdiction,
Yeah,
and on the Inspector General, we probably could. And I was considering doing that because as I told you, when things heat up, we're going to go back and talk about the contribution refund program. So I was thinking that we could do that at the same time, because there aren't going to be that many voices. And if somebody really doesn't want it, they're going to spend money. So I think it's very important that somebody speaks. But you have to tell us. You tell us.
That was my question, was if we can tell you that.
Somebody needs to advocate for the importance of this being passed, whoever it is.
And I think we have, and we do. So I don't see anything wrong. I mean, we've been to 2 city commission meetings saying do this. We spent 2 years saying do this. So all we're doing is following through on what we said is appropriate for city government.
And it's funny what you said earlier, but I'm certainly not as well connected as you. But I have a lot of friends who vote, and they're going to go out in groves to vote emotionally on that other issue. And I think that'll feed right into a yes on this issue. I think they go hand in hand. So see what happens.
All right, any other questions about the charter review? Okay, so next we have the advisory opinion. Last board meeting, we looked at it and sent it back to John to put our opinion as well at our recommendation as well as the legal opinion. He has done so. Do you want to,
Sure.
what you,
Sure, this is obviously non-controversial. But no, it's, and I think the gentlemen were not at the last meeting. I think we all said this just felt wrong the way it was written. And I remember when I was writing it, I never imagined I was going to reach this conclusion. I said, how is this permissible? But I think, based on the facts that were given to us, we don't have that doing business with one's agency or contractual or conflicting contractual relationships language in our local ordinance that we find in the state code, which would clearly prohibit this. I think it's important to point out in 2019, we did ask for that language to be included in the ethics code, and the city commission declined.
What year was that again?
2019.
2019.
November. This may be a reason for us to pick that up again and start having a discussion on maybe we need to have this covered. Because I think that it doesn't feel right. And I think, but as I said, it's just because it doesn't feel right, does the code prohibit it? And based on the fact presented to me, I didn't see that it was explicitly prohibited under the plain language of the ordinance.
is that something that the city commission could decide, or would this be in 10 years when they do the next charter review?
With the language, the ethics
We were
code,
to try and
it's
get
by ordinance, so we wouldn't have to put in the charter.
So the charter issue there.
We would just do it like we do with other
Okay.
recommendations. Like I think one of the later items on the agenda is also a recommendation to the ethics code. So we could probably include them all together in a single package. As far as the new language that was requested by Mr. Commissar and others, that would be found on, where is it? Bottom of page 3. Usually put one space in between paragraphs. This one I put 2 spaces, so it would stand out. It's the very last paragraph. While the inquirer does not state that he or she intends to communicate directly, and then that's where we talked about whether that would constitute lobbying. We did go over what the definitions of lobbying and lobbyist are. We talk about whether that would be considered lobbying. But essentially, if they were lobbying, they would be doing so in their private individual capacity, not as an employee. So I don't find that to be a misuse of public position if they're lobbying. Now, there are other factors that could be presented that would lead to that. And I think I do put somewhere in here, if they are anyway using their position to put their thumb on the scale, then they violated the ordinance. But if they really are, doing the straight and narrow, and they're simply, I think the way this was presented to us is the person was just providing just information, just kind of telling people, oh, you want to do this, you fill out this paperwork, submit it yourself, blah, blah, blah. So I think that was kind of the way it was, I think, framed to us when it was brought to us. It was very vague though, so this could be interpreted as if they're going to be knocking down doors and calling up all their best friends and working the city saying, you got to make sure my guy gets this. But that's not the way it was presented to us. It was presented actually in the opposite direction. Now, of course, our advisory opinions are only as good as the facts that they present to us that we base them upon, which is why our final paragraph always says, second, I guess in this case, it's the second to last paragraph, accordingly based on the fact presented by the inquirer and the board's reliance on those facts. And that's, as I always put in my closing paragraph, to say if they fudge some of the facts, try to get a better opinion from us, well, then the opinion isn't binding. As far as advisory opinions are to provide advice and recommendations, the actual last paragraph, which is not a typical last paragraph, does say that you shouldn't do this. It likely violates the state ethics code. I think we also put in here it's going to violate city policies almost for sure. But then we also say it creates an appearance of impropriety. We do say we recommend you don't do this. So
Quick question, what
Yes, I'm sure it's required that if you do have outside employment, you have to fill out dual employment form.
Yes.
And I'm sure a dual employment form makes reference to the state ethics code and saying there shouldn't be ongoing conflict or something to that effect, if I'm mistaken.
I don't know about the specific
If we
form.
can see the ethics, the dual employment form, we can reference to the fact that the dual employment form, you will not be approved based on the information provided. Since we're saying it's a violation of the state ethics code, you should not be approved for doing outside employment on these facts. If I'm not mistaken, based on what you stated here, there would be ongoing contractual violations. Therefore, any outside employment will be in violations of that state, the ethics code, which I think will deny outside employment on those grounds. The recommendation is if you seek dual employment, the recommendation will be to deny that dual employment approval.
Okay,
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah, we can have a discussion with.
Because that still falls within our purview because it's still analyzing a state ethics code application applicable in this situation to a city employee seeking outside employment. We think there's going to be ongoing contractual violation.
Mr. Smith?
I have a question. As far as advisory opinions, do we ever ask questions did we do that in this case? Did we ask that he get hired? Did we ask that this individual, he or she, get hired as a result?
Well, this individual is working with a group of people to create an LLC. They're already working in the city. And they've already decided they're not going to do this. But we've had at least 3 conversations. And we try to ask the most pertinent questions so we can give the best advice. We want to know if they're covered individuals. We try to get all the implications before we.
What's the temperature of the board now with this revision? Any concerns?
I like the last 2 sentences are in there, particularly the one that says you shouldn't do this. Even though our ordinance as it's written, it's not a violation, but I also think we need to go the next step. 2019 is quite a while ago. I think it's time for this board to take a stance and say, we need to at least meet the state standard on this issue. Because I agree, if a local independent ethics board doesn't at least exceed state standards, what's the purpose of us even existing? And I just, every one of us, when we read this, to just, it's just, I don't like the smells back, but since COVID, I don't smell too well. But it just reeks of impropriety, working for the city and then having a company that you're associated contract with the city, that alone creates an appearance of impropriety. And to say, well, I won't get involved or I won't talk, that would be like being the president, saying you're going to disassociate yourself with businesses while you're president. Does that really happen? So I think we need to be more proactive on this. That's just my opinion. And of course, the board can discuss it further, but I think we need to pursue better language. We need to have the ordinance revisited.
Would it be possible, trying to think of the 3 things we got going on, an outside group asking us to delay so they can give us some legal opinion, a new idea from Mr. Ray about connecting it to the outside, which I think is a great idea, that if there is some form out there that you're also going to violate, let's remind the people of all the tangled web that this idea creates. So we'd be asking to bring it back anyway to add that language. And then do we also think about if we're going to have to sign off on something, how do we notify the city commission at the same time? Hey, we just signed off on something. You guys might want to look into this or close whatever loophole this is through ordinance.
But isn't that concept of additional employment covered under city, there's a section in here on, it may violate city policy.
Yeah, we do put that in there.
So would that be covered, would that concept be covered in that language?
I purposely don't try to provide an opinion on what city policy does, because I feel that's the role of the city attorney's office, which is why I say it may. It's kind of my way of saying, on that issue, you need to call the city attorney's office. I'm only gonna issue a very narrow opinion on the ethics code only, which is why that language was used. It says may, I think it probably does, but the implication is pick up the phone and call the city attorney. So
Is additional employment covered under the city attorney?
the policy that would prohibit that?
Mhm.
Yeah, I believe it would
Okay.
fall within their realm.
Okay.
So is the same thing that you're asking to be on there already on the state employee, I mean, the city employee contract as well?
We don't know. What I would suggest, because we're not in a hurry, we can answer these questions and come back. We can talk with procurement people, we can talk with the city attorney, and then come back to you with a more informed answer.
Well, there's also a question of being an owner of an LLC isn't necessarily outside employment.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, if you,
If you're making money,
Okay.
consider any income, right? If you have eBay website or anything, you make any income, that's considered outside employment, you gotta report. So that, if you don't, we'll see if you're drawing income with that. So, yeah. Yeah, I'll just get more information as far as, these advisory opinions not only give direction to the person asking it, but also give direction to city attorneys whenever, you know, and I agree with you. We're not making a conclusion saying it will be or will not be a violation, but saying, you know, based on the form that you fill out for doing employment, which references, you know, potential conflicts, it may be denied on the grounds that there's potential conflict here, something to that effect. I think we have a city attorney.
Let's see, try to say something.
Do you mind if I haven't looked at the conflict of interest or the secondary employment, but Mr. Ray is correct. I think from my recollection, our office is sometimes asked to review those just exactly for that purpose. So I don't know exactly what the language says. I just haven't looked at one in a while. But if we reviewed something like that raised this issue, we would deny or we would recommend that the department deny the secondary employment in that case. So we have had the occasion to do that, not often. But, you know, and that could partly be because maybe not everything is brought to our attention, of course, or even, you know, but the city staff is required to complete those secondary employment forms and to renew them on an annual basis. So I think if you're going to bring it back, you know, we can get the form for Mr. Floyd to include in your package and you can see what it looks like. It raises an interesting question. I'd be happy to look at it as well.
Thank you for that point of information. Any other?
It's good to know that this employee's not gonna go forward. That's what you said, right? So that's good. But I think,
Not in the city.
yeah, but that process. Yeah. I think this process is a real
Yes.
weakness in our ordinance, so I think we all recognize that, and that's something I think we need to pursue. So,
I'm sorry.
On that same note of just things that we kind of think about, what jumped out to me when I was reading this the last time was that our whole premise here was that this person isn't relying on their connections, that they work at the city. But the lobbying isn't lobbying if it happens at a duly noticed meeting. So, and there's no contingency problem. So the person could be getting a gazillion-dollar contingency fee, do everything behind the scenes, and then actually show up at the meeting and testify on behalf of their friends LLC to get it. And that actually wouldn't, that's always, I'm sure this definition predates my time here, and I'm sure it was a First Amendment issue. But the fact that our lobbying ordinance has a caveat that says if you say it from the microphone, it's not lobbying, no matter how much you're being paid to say it, just kind of jumped out at me when I was looking at this set of facts. And it's just something that maybe we should all pay attention to, because that does seem like a possible loophole in the lobbying ordinance, that it appears that you can say anything from 3 minutes.
Yeah. Any other questions or concerns on this now? It appears the will of the board that we will postpone voting on this, come back, and I have made some for directives. Yes, Mr. Reed.
Just to clarify, so we're gonna bring the form back so we can see the form. Does any of the language here need to be changed to reflect that, or do you want to see the form before we make that decision? And then the second question is, if we want to look at an ordinance, do we want to see language at the next meeting on a proposed ordinance, or what timeline would you like on that?
Can I make a suggestion? I'm comfortable in voting on this as it is. I think you've done a good job of addressing the issues and recommending not to do it. I don't know how much further you can go with your opinion, with an advisory opinion. That's just, I look at it, I know how everybody else feels.
I actually agree with the analysis and the recommendations. I think the language is inclusive.
Don't have to like it for it to be right.
Those that have expressed desire to see more information,
Yeah.
does anyone, would you like to hold off on the vote? Again, there is no emergency on it. If you'd like to see some of that information before you feel comfortable making a vote.
I'll hold off. Oh, well,
Okay.
we can still vote on it if you guys are going forward. I would, just to strengthen this a little bit more, is saying we identify there is a state conflict with the outside employment. We should bring it back saying, yeah, there's a state conflict, and along with that, this will also be, in violation of our city ordinance, because you cannot have outside employment that continues to create a conflict based on the form you got filled out.
Okay.
So,
Based on,
you can go ahead and get the form and draft language based on what you see. You don't have to wait for us to come back. If you speak to the city attorney, get the form and see if it is clear that that makes reference to the state ethics code, you can bring it back that way. And everything
if it's
else.
clear, we actually could even just kind of attach it, say, see attached form that you would be in violation or something of that nature.
And,
as well.
and John, that wouldn't be in conflict with your position not to advise the city on city policy, would it?
I think if we're just referencing what's in the form, we're not.
And you're not saying it's gonna be a violation, it's just it may be a violation of the city.
Yeah, say, please see the attached form, which explicitly states blah, blah, blah. If it does, it may not. I think as the city attorney mentioned, they may fill out the form, it still needs to go and be approved. Somebody is gonna look at it and say, wait a second, what is this? And then, questions will be asked, whether the state ethics code is referenced explicitly in the document or not, I don't know. But I do think that at some point, someone is going to review it and start asking.
Since it's more of a fact-finding mission at this point, this will also possibly, so I personally don't think that you would need to come back with language next time, because I think let's see where the loopholes are, and that will help guide what directives we may want them to do. So I say we keep this one on the back burner.
Language in the opinion.
Correct.
In the opinion. Okay.
Correct, yes. So keep it just to this, but not necessarily directives for language to ask the city commission for ethics code changes yet, even though we're recognizing this loophole, but not necessarily stating what that loophole is until we get a little more information as to be able to state it more factually, I guess.
Okay. And if we're coming back, maybe in our packets, we can include what the state code is, so you kind of can look at it and see exactly what it is. It's pretty extensive because it has a lot of exceptions in there and all that. So, so we could include, we'll just keep this as it is. Won't make any changes. Include the form on the outside employment and the state statute dealing with those, like subsections 3 and 7. They deal with doing business with one's agency and collecting contractual relationships.
Okay.
Make note, Tasker, that John delegated upward, and he's gonna give them some documents that they have to read.
All right. Any other questions on the advisory opinion? We will put the vote off just so that everyone feels comfortable with all the information that's going to be included with it. And if there's anything else you do think of, definitely let Mr. Floyd or Mr. Reed know so that maybe next time when we come to the table, we'll have as much as we can. Agenda item number 11.
Number 11, Mike, John and I, we had some discussions about ethics complaints concerning board members and staff. And as we discussed it, I decided to reach out to local commissions. I think we're the only one that's a board, but the local commissions from across the state to see how they handle those. And also talk to the state ethics commission. The local boards, each one just kind of does their own thing, but the bottom line is they take the person out of the chain. If they're not involved in dealing with the complaint in any way. Like if there was a complaint about me, John may have to handle it with the board, and I would not be involved with it at all. Or if it was a board member, they may not be able to vote or act on it. Generally, and it's funny because when I was talking with Miami, who I look to the most, they said, well, we'll do that process, but if it ever gets past probable cause, I don't know what we're gonna do because they haven't gotten there yet. Because what you're dealing with is the appearance of some type of favoritism or something of that nature when you start in, a process where you're going through a hearing process with members of your own. When I talked to the State Ethics Commission, they are required by statute, if there's a complaint against them, there's the State Commission or the staff, it goes to the Senate, I believe the Senate and the House, and they convene a hearing. So if they get a complaint, they send a letter to the complainant and say, you need to take that complaint directly to the Senate. And one of the advantages there is that people are less likely to send frivolous complaints to the legislative Senate. So, there's one is appearance, that's one issue, and then dealing with frivolous complaints is the other. When I talked to the State Ethics Commission, he gave us one option. The Deputy Director, Solowski, he gave us one option, us referring people to the State Ethics Commission so they could handle the complaint. And John's going to talk about this some more because we had differing views because it's just not that simple, even as I think about it, because some of their standards and some of our standards aren't the same. So do you sentence them to it gets past probable cause and we handle it? Or do the Senate take it to a whole process? I mean, there are a lot of questions. Even if you do that, I favor that because there'll probably be fewer frivolous complaints and it would take away some of the appearance of any kind of conflict. But it's not an easy answer.
I don't really have anything new to, I think that the state commission seems like a logical choice. I think Dwight brings up a good point. There's something in our code that's more stringent than the state code. Are they going to be equipped to handle that? That's probably something we'd have to enter into with some type of agreement similar to what we would do with DOA if we did a formal complaint. But I think that's something we can look at down the road.
And this is dealing with violation of ethics code, not our policies, because we have certain policies regarding political engagement. Those complaints we review ourselves, right? Regarding our members, but these are actual violations of our city ethics code.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, isn't this more against us?
Mm-hmm.
Or against the board
The
or
board.
staff?
Yeah, we're a staff, but yeah, because right now we can bring, if somebody brings a complaint against one of our members for engaging in politics, because we have a policy in that, we review that
Correct.
internally.
Correct.
Okay.
But if some outsider says this person's violation of the ethics code,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, why can't we do that? If we're reviewing our policies, violation of our policies, and we can bring an action saying we can remove a member for violating our policies, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, that's currently within our bylaws.
And generally, that's going to probably be more a complaint we bring against a member ourselves rather than somebody outside because it is your bylaws. It's not an ordinance or something outside. Whereas with the ethics code, it is an outside individual. And like I said, it can give that appearance of conflict. Plus, I just can imagine frivolous complaints and having to deal with those as opposed to what I imagine, and I could be wrong, but I see people just being a little bit more careful when it comes to seeing those kind of
That
complaints.
might change now that you need a sworn complaint and actually see it. So if the law passes,
Mhm.
it'll be almost impossible to make a complaint. So we may have to worry about this, but yeah, it'll be a good exercise to go through this.
Yeah, we just need to get something in our procedures that says how we want to handle it.
Yeah, because, yeah, I think, yeah, that process is pretty onerous if you want to bring a complaint against a ethics commissioner at the state level.
Mhm.
It basically takes an act of Congress to remove
Right.
somebody from the commission.
Do we want to dialogue just a little bit about thoughts and feelings so we can give them some directive? I mean, we don't have to come to a conclusion today if it's something that you want to mull over, but if anyone has thoughts on either of these two choices, or again, would somebody say, well, I think we should just bring it against ourselves? I feel like the part that we would get into trickier water then would be if enough of us felt like we couldn't be impartial and had to recuse ourselves from the situation, is then we may not be able to confirm right or wrong or probable cause
Yeah,
with it.
I don't think we're in a position to make a decision today on this. I think just do more research, find out, pros and cons of having the ethics board review that, and talk to them about the concerns you have as far as you may have more stringent policies. Can you guys differentiate between state policies and because basically you'll have the advocate. If they go through the same process, you're gonna have the attorney general reviewing the process and be an advocate for the commission. That'll be a DOA process as well. So, yeah, find out.
We can look more at how it would really work.
Dwight, in your conversations did you speak to a number of independent ethics boards? You get a handle on all their different policies, or just City of Miami?
No, Naples, Jacksonville, maybe West Palm Beach. We basically have a little coalition now that we can push the button, ask questions.
Anything good from those other ones? Do they have any process in place?
Just what
This was, yeah.
Is it?
just what I described. It's
Nobody mirrors what the state ethics board does?
That'll be almost impossible. Yeah, because you have to set up a committee of 3 senators, 3 House members to review the case. Then,
You can stop.
well, hold on. Then to remove it, you need the governor, Senate president, the speaker, and the chief judge to agree.
Well, it does sound very non-political.
Yes, I mean, that would certainly take away frivolous complaints, but
Yeah.
yet I feel like we still want people to complain if they honestly feel
Sure.
like there's something to be said. So I do think there is that fine line of frivolity versus,
legitimate.
yeah, truly legitimate, and making sure that we still maintain what we've claimed all along, is that we are here for these complaints, even if it's against us, and we are willing and ready to accept them, and won't make you, go through hell or high water just to say something that may actually be blatant, that was just not even on purpose.
We can delve into it and give you pros and cons of implications and talk to people and not just go off the top of our heads. So we can do that.
There's the only option right now. We have the state ethics code, the commission. Who else do we have to review our complaints at this point?
They're suggested by the city commission.
It's
Well, the ethics commission at the state level, but I think that would probably be messier than the legislature.
In them all. Anybody else have any thoughts on it, or any questions or concerns, or any other ideas that we may want to think of?
Anybody else who? Send it to.
All right, and then number 12, annual ethics training refresher course.
Yes, and I know that Kelly has looked at the course, and I know that Attorney Calhoun has looked at the course, because I've got feedback, but it's time for the annual ethics training course. We're developing that. Pastor and I are working day to day, working with staff. I actually started with the course that Chief Kelly developed on ethical decision making. And it's a little more challenging to do it online and not be able to converse. So I looked at different models, and there are models out there. And I conferred with my expert in the family, my daughter, who does instructional design. And we were looking at the same material that she was suggesting. And I came up with certain theories, certain models, and I'm combining two theories. One is a model for decision-making. And the one says, you walk them through the process, you tell them what the process is. Then the second time, you let them do it on their own. And so we have one scenario, then we sum up that scenario, and then we do a second scenario, and we actually add things. Like in the first scenario, it was pretty much do or don't do. In the second scenario, it'll be more like, well, is this fair? If you make this decision, would you do this for somebody else? There are other questions that you can ask. And I have different models that Chief Kelly has shared with me that kind of makes this a little easier for me. We're actually using a cartoon presentation. It's partly cartoon because the people who are cartoons are real employees. We took their pictures and turned them into cartoons. And I didn't know how they were going to receive it, but everybody has been excited about it, actually. And so we're continuing that process because a lot of learning, I think, just rather than focus on right and wrong and moral issues, we're focusing on critical thinking. Just trying to help people understand how to approach a problem and make an ethical decision, taking into account all the options, analyzing those options. How would it impact them? How would it impact you? And then after doing that, just trying to come up with the best solution, understanding that doing nothing is not a solution and showing the implications of why it's not a solution. So we did that with the first scenario where employee abused a credit card. And then the second scenario is the law enforcement officer assisting a TPD, and we're not using city names, but TPD is helping Leon County with an arrest, assisting standby. And all of a sudden he figures out that the person in the car is a TPD officer. And this is a DUI. So does he try to talk sheriff deputy from arresting this person, saying that, and I'll take him home. I'll take him home and sober him up, and I'll take the car home, which they do a lot, okay? Or do they call their command to say, we got a problem, which is what they're supposed to do. So, but we're doing it in a way where if you're the student, you're the police officer, and you have to make that decision. And we're going to try and make it as real as we can. And so that's essentially it. By the time we bring it back, and we'll bring it back a final version, but by then it will be finalized and we'll be starting to implement it. I'll send you updates as we go through it. And if you want to give feedback, Attorney Calhoun, you're obligated to give feedback. She gets very sharp feedback, so she obligated herself by doing that. I appreciate your volunteering.
Absolutely.
And Chief Kelly has been there from point A.
Real short story to your scenario you just described actually happened about 2:00 in the morning in Miami, not naming any jurisdictions. And the officer did the right thing, a probationary officer called the next rank up. The next rank up drove to the scene at that time of the morning and assisted with the unarrest. And somebody dropped a dime, shows you how long ago this was. And Miami Herald got a hold of it, and you know what hit the fan. Now, the officer did the right thing, so the probation officer got nothing. The supervisor was and decertified.
So that's a good scenario. Use all of that. I appreciate that. But I just want to update you on that and invite you, if you haven't look at it. We keep updating it. And I'll send you a new link because the original link, it stops. If you don't know to push the right button, you can't keep going. But the most up-to-date version is pretty complete until we get to some dialogue in the next version. So if you want to see it, let me know. But that's it.
And I will add, we talked about this, in an ideal world, this is a classroom training session.
Right.
You just can't achieve, no matter how much you try to put in that software, the dynamics of being face-to-face and interacting with each other and playing off that critical thinking, but it's a commitment the city probably won't make.
Well, 3,500 people,
Yeah.
we can't teach in a month, so. But I think they'll learn from it.
All right, any other questions on that? All right, thank you for your work on that. And next we have agenda item 13, revision to the ethics code.
So this issue, we talked about bringing this up at a later date, and I think we probably are going to need to discuss this further, but I think I wanted to bring it today to focus primarily on this de minimis language. We did have an opportunity to meet with the city attorney and discuss this. And this kind of arises from one of the advisory opinions we did a while back where one of the members of the city commission was going to participate in a scavenger hunt on a radio station. We said couldn't do it because they received something of value through the great publicity through the radio station. And I think that time we said, you can't do that, even though it's kind of like what we had discussed earlier today. It's not the decision you wanted to reach, but technically it is what it is. I think we've talked about what city commissioners go down to WFSU and do those, those go on the radio and try to raise money for the station. They are getting publicity for themselves, which have something of value. So, so this de minimis language, there's really two ways to do it. One, this is a more subjective test that gives the board kind of more freedom to make a decision on a case-by-case basis. The other alternative would be if we wanted to create some type of dollar amount. The state, they've got $25 and under, doesn't have to be reported. 25 to 100 has to be reported. 100, you can't do it. So that's an option as well. Keep in mind, we're supposed to be more stringent than the state, so we probably don't want to go exactly where the state is. But I think we did want to discuss whether that issue of going on the radio station is something we really feel should be an ethics violation or not. And if we feel that that's really not what we envision a job to be, then how do we get to a position where we still keep our gift and solicitation acceptance ban in place, but we don't cast the net so broad that we're kind of stopping activities which I think most people would expect your elected officials to do. So that's what the de minimis language is. Said this is the more subjective. Since we are opening this up, I went ahead and made a couple of other changes. The covered individual definition, which is similar to the reporting individual at the state statute level. Never liked the fact that we had the financial disclosure and the purchasing authority in the same paragraph, even though I think they do kind of go hand in hand. We wanted to keep them separate. Just in case somebody has that authority, but maybe they haven't been designated through the Commission on Ethics to file a form. We want them to be covered by that. We also wanted to narrow it where the person who in the procurement process has to actually really be contributing in some real way. The way that this was written, and I remember this was an issue I brought up in 2019 when we were adopting it. It always felt like it was too broad because it said any who's participated in the preceding 12 months through the decision, approval, disapproval, recommendation, or preparation process. Well, what is participating in the preparation? Does the secretary who makes the photocopies is now, would she fall within the definition? I don't think we ever anticipate that is what we intended. So I think this just says they have to, somebody who substantially influenced the decision. And then we do explicitly put the administrative support is not a covered individual.
And that's why you have and versus or there, because you want to make sure that basically it's the conjunctive versus disjunctive there. To be a procurement employee, you got to do all on line 44. You got to do the top recommendation and.
Yes.
So that's why you did that versus or.
Yes.
And I have been teaching, the way I have been teaching is the way we think you want it to be. I've been teaching, I use logic, and to me, logic was that this was intended to deal with people who make decisions or influence who does business with the city and how they do business. And the secretary, if all they're doing is making copies, they're not doing that. But if it's written to include them, then it's too broad. And so I was on one end of this, and John and the city attorney were on another end, and it wasn't because they were wrong or I was wrong, because the ordinance says what it says, and it doesn't fly with what seems to be reasonable.
So, it could be six, one, half a dozen the other. We figure, why not just clarify it so there's no ambiguity? And I think that's really the purpose of this. Then on page 3, this Inspector General position didn't exist when this was drafted, so we just add that. The language that applies to this board is there was language that says advisory, quasi-judicial, or any other board, commission, or committee. I think that would apply to us, except that the language that's in the ordinance now says members appointed by the city commission to serve. And obviously that would not include us. So, and that we take that out so it doesn't exclude us, but include every other board that falls under the city. And then as far as the solicitation acceptance of gifts, subsection B of that section has some exceptions, and we just run parallel to the de minimis definition, saying a gift of de minimis value would not. So obviously that's contingent on the definition of de minimis being approved. So that's really what that is. But primarily, I think I'm correct. The purpose of today is really to focus on the de minimis and see if that is the direction that this board wants to go in. Like I said, we can keep it more general where it's more subjective by the board. We could assign a dollar amount, or we could leave it how it is and not even include it at all. Those are really your three options.
And we are open to anything that's on there, but that's the main thing. But some things we still need to discuss with the city attorney, particularly when we change the definition to incorporate us. It could also end up incorporating people who represent the city on bicycle trails, when it's not really intended for them either. So, we need to have that discussion further. But when it comes to de minimis, we really want to know how you felt about that. De minimis or its numbers?
Any discussion on the matter? Anybody leaning one way or another, or want to?
I'm concerned about making it too subjective, because we want to give commissioners directions of how to act. So I don't want to be dependent on who's the makeup of this board is to determine what the minimus is and what is not the minimus. But again, putting a value on it either is like, how do you determine value on a commercial segment? You have to price it out. It's okay, this is how much it would cost you to be on the radio station at this time. To that point, I don't know. I agree with it. We have to provide some direction to allow them, or the job of public officials, to be a cheerleader for local businesses, to help them out, to actually bring attention to issues that they believe is important to them and why they were voted and put into the office, is to be a voice to certain issues. So I don't know if there's some direction we get from other ordinances or the state ethics code as far as what they, I think right now the Senate code, but it's one of the things we got. I don't want to be too open-ended to a point that they'll have to come to us for advisory opinion. Would this be the minimus value every time they go on a commercial or they go on NPR? Is that, what is the value of that? Is it the minimus or not? Or posting, I'm here at this restaurant, come on down, support your local businesses.
So gifts has the limit of $100. We start there. And then as far as those things that don't have immediate value, I mean, you could look at, like I think we talked about it, like the price of advertising in that market. So there are ways to evaluate it if we set just a ceiling.
We do a de minimis value definition and then have a separate exception for public appearances in media, just because it seems to me like it's gonna get weird when we're like, oh, a bottle of water up to $50, but then some guy's doing an ad and it's kind of weird because I think if this ever got big, FEC problems for the network and the radio station would come up about equal time and stuff, but just the idea of we define de minimis value, but then we have some other sentence that says like what we kind of felt at that last review, which was we never want to stop good faith broadcasting about community issues is not a thing of value or whatever. Like that's not a gift. Just a way to kind of separate them so we don't have to say how long was the spot? Was it too long that it became valuable or something?
Because in a time frame where it's not necessarily an election time and somebody was working a telethon, I mean, we don't want to discourage them from helping out local businesses and things like that. Again, that's, I'm going to say the benefit, but I don't mean their own personal benefit of having a notable name call and say, oh, this could be helpful. I didn't realize this. But we certainly don't want it to look like that's the reason they are calling either. And to use that to their personal gain. So to have something in there about personal or public appearances that is not for personal gain, that maybe is more for organizational benefit. Because to me, that's almost like when doing ribbon cuttings, you know, you have somebody there and that's not advertising them. That's actually advertising, hey, the business is opening and this is so great. So it's less about the person that's attending and more about the place or the event. So I like that idea of keeping this, but then maybe specifying a public appearance.
I agree. I think that, because at the state level, it's along the same lines of, a donation or a gift to an organization does not fall under the definition of gift. So having that same kind of application here, I think is a good idea.
Yeah, I think that Carlos, you were kind of looking at both points simultaneously, and they're both subjective. Assigning dollar amounts is subjective, just like using this definition. And again, a lot of times we think who's going to be sitting here after us, but I have to, again, subjectively say that my assumption is they're here because they have integrity and they were appointed by somebody who knows that, and they're going to make the same kind of judgments we would. I like this definition a lot. I think this is good. I think getting the dollar amounts, we could go on infinitum, but I also like what you said about personal benefit. But I would be very cautious about it going through a list of dollar amounts. I think that's not the direction to go.
And I do like that, you know, I mean, again, our goal is to be a little more stringent and less lax, but I think in this case, since we're talking about putting a dollar amount on true advertising, actually may be a lot higher than we really think. And then would there be all these true de minimis things occurring that we really want to talk about actually? But now we don't have to because we almost set it too high based off of a 5-minute time slot or whatever that may be. So I caution us maybe against putting that the amounts, and we're going to have to keep coming back every time inflation happens and every time things happen. And now advertising is free because whatever. And so that would also limit us coming back and having to revise that, or people in the future. I mean, if we put specific amounts. I mean, I think these other amounts that are on here are very standard, and I don't see us having to revise those annually or anything like that. But I think when we're talking about these smaller amounts and this impropriety aspect is that we maybe, my opinion is that we maybe keep the financial number off, but more specify just a little bit about what that might be for the public.
Question on number 4 again. So we're saying anything that does not exceed 10,000 would be considered procurement?
Oh,
It says any city employee provides only administrative support that exceeds or expected to exceed 10,000. So if it's 10,000 and provide administrative support.
Yeah, I think we could, because there's a 10,000 in the first paragraph. And I
Yeah.
think it was just trying to make it clear that that exception was there. We might find a better way to put that exception in there without just repeating the language.
Yes.
But I could play around with that and bring it back.
So yeah, I think that would work on that language, and I think, I don't know if we want to give options as far as, I think Mr. Commissar mentioned exceptions to what the minimum is, or what is exception to this definition, or maybe like this, I don't know. See if the state has any direction on this matter.
Or even just a subsection, not necessarily a laundry list, because I think we want to get away from that, because then people say, well, it wasn't on there, but more like public appearances, because I think that would cover kind of most of the things that we're kind of thinking about, whether it's the grand opening of something or the commercial spot or the telethon or the just being at an event to support that event. And I think it also may then allow some of our elected public officials to participate in those things, which I think are good, that may be holding them back from being a participant in things that even just for wanting to support things that are in community, but that they're afraid to for fear of how it may appear to others. Because I think that's important that, again, we support each other in our community and be supportive of Tallahassee in general.
So I like the idea of language, like something to the effect, in addition to what's here, that says something like if the action or the act is done in primarily in support of the organization or agency, that would be a broad enough exception that could cover a broad range of what we're talking about.
Public appearances should not be considered gifts to the elected official or something.
Mm-hmm. For not benefit for public, I mean, for benefit for public and not for personal.
Kind of gets under that honorarium thing we talked about a while back too, that kind of like quasi, if you want to have somebody to thing, but you can't pay to get them there.
Yeah, that may help eliminate some of when people do ask you the question, if it's a little more straightforward on those things. I mean, you've already put out an opinion, so you could say, refer to our previous advisory opinion, but something like that. I was going to mention this again during directives, but since we're specific, the other thing we were talking about earlier is to add in, if we're doing revisions, about kind of meeting state standard on the advisory opinion. So just since we're kind of talking about that, is putting something in here about that as well.
Hear that one more time?
For the state ethics, for the advisory opinion stuff that we were talking about, how we were saying, well, maybe we could also concoct some language in the future that would go into so that we meet their standards.
The discussion we had earlier, I think what she's saying is we should be drawing these up together to present them, if we're going to present them to be changed as ordinances to the city council at the same time, right? Instead of coming up with one and then the other one later on.
Back up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was just saying collectively, just as a reminder that
Yeah.
maybe if we could add that in next time too, so when we're looking at it, you're not having to come back to us 10 times with.
Oh, yeah. No, I think we probably just want to go once. So, yeah.
They only want to see us when they
Yeah.
have it.
They don't want to see us that much. Yeah.
And actually, this one to me is a loosening, more of a loosening
It is.
standard. The other one's a little bit of a tightening. Maybe they'll complement each other and go through more smoothly.
Well, it's, just from talking to people, there is such a conscience when it comes to politics. We'll discuss this more in June, then they'll go on vacation until August or September. And we'll probably not, we'll sew it up, but we probably won't bring it up to them before November, October, after the election. Because some people may try to use this to say that city commission is trying to loosen the ordinances, even though it's not them. And so 'cause that's been some of the discussion, so I just want to put that out there. It's, even though it makes sense, even though it's reasonable,
Doesn't matter.
they still may fear it. So timing will help with that.
Similar to the way we have a window where we won't accept complaints for an election. We shouldn't get sucked into that.
Any more questions or comments on the ethics code today? Okay, next, any public comment on non-agenda items?
No.
Okay, so directives, I think we'll have them, but talking about maybe consider speaking out a little closer to the voting time about our two things that will be on the ballot. And then we just talked about it, but by adding in meeting state standards for the ethics code. And then on the advisory opinion, getting those dual employment papers and just kind of taking a look at those, city and state. And then, coming up with some more pros and cons regarding ethics complaints versus board and staff, pros and cons. Any other directives that I didn't catch or remind?
After anything else in your notes.
All right. That being said,
So moved.
Billy moves and Mr. Hay seconds that we are adjourned.